My name is Horace Knight. I'm a member of the Kingsway-Lambton United Church Fresh Start Committee. The Fresh Start service is an interactive service which allows attendees the opportunity to make comments or raise questions after the meditation. This Sunday, Colin McCartney and Jordan Thoms will be speaking on racism and social justice. It was thought that this would be helpful to have a discussion prior to the Fresh Start service, thus the reason for this evening's forum. Tonight, the emphasis will be on the Black Lives Matter movement, which we have seen particularly frequently over the last few months from the US. We will learn about why this issue is important in Toronto, as well as this whole country of ours. All lives matter. Black lives matter too. Numerous sociological studies have identified negative disparities affecting Blacks in education, employment, treatment by police, and many other areas. We believe that a discussion on this issue is extremely important at this time. So although all lives matter, this evening's discussion will be about Black lives. Discussions such as these are most fruitful when they're solutions oriented. I am sure you will hear a lot of egregious situations this evening. You may feel a sense of sadness or even pity for people affected by this. I personally believe that these are unhelpful emotions. Instead, what I hope we're able to achieve, or at least start to achieve, is an acknowledgement of some of the injustices and what we as citizens of this country, this city, and this Christian community can do to start ensuring that all of God's children are treated with fairness and respect. This subject was first discussed by our youth group back in the spring. It provided an opportunity for that group to discuss how policing was impacting the Black community, especially young Black men. I would like to introduce the presenters this evening. They are Colin McCartney and Pastor Jordan Thoms. Colin is the president and founder of Connect City. He is an urban ministry veteran with 30 years of ministry experience in high-risk communities. Colin already has 2 best-selling books. They include The Beautiful Disappointment and Red Letter Revolution. He and his wife Judith, our former youth pastor, have co-authored a new book, What Does Justice Look Like? And Why Does God Care About It? This book will be available next month through Amazon.ca. Jordan is a pastor also at Connect City, Warden Underground Church. In addition to his work at Warden Underground, Jordan also co-hosts a podcast with Steve Norton called Films in Full Color. It is a series that examines films, that explores issues, especially within the Black community. The hope is that through the lens of this film, they might be able to shine a light on issues faced by Black people. I would also like to thank Reverend Leanne Ketchum for her assistance with tonight's forum. Leanne is currently our youth minister and soon to be presiding minister of our Fresh Start service as well. This is an opportunity in a discussion that has become more critical in a diverse city and country like ours, as we try to find ways to live more peacefully with one another. After the presentation, you will have an opportunity to make comments and ask questions of the presenters. They're eager to receive your input. Without further ado, I would like to turn this evening over to Colin and Jordan.
Thank you, Horace. It's good to have you do such a good introduction and the introduction bio of myself. I mean, that was wow. I'm going to pay you to come around everywhere I go. You do the introduction. It makes me sound better than I really am. So I appreciate that. Jordan, can you hear me, my brother? You're here somewhere. Let me see here. We need to unmute you. So someone, whoever's hosting this will unmute you. I think it's Leanne. And maybe Leanne, if you can unmute the rest of the crew, Andre as well. I see Ashley and Enrico are together. You guys make a great couple. So if you can unmute them as well, because they are all on the panel. So it's great to have you as well. All of you guys. Good to be here. So many people, so many faces. Some of you I don't know, some of you I do know. And I know that all of us are concerned about what we've been seeing in the news lately, what we've been seeing on the happening down south. But for those of us who live in predominantly Black neighborhoods, for those of us who are Black, and for those of us who are white like myself, who spent 35 years working in under-resourced Black neighborhoods, this kind of stuff is not a surprise to us. In fact, we've been seeing this for years and years and years. And the frustration keeps boiling up and boiling up. And because we watched the video of George Floyd being executed basically by a member of the state for 8 minutes and watched this precious man die, it's become an issue, and certainly put a laser beam focus on the issue of police brutality, but it goes deeper than that. There's a systemic issue behind all of this. And so we want to talk about that as a panel. And at the same time, for those of us who are watching, just listen in and give it your best to just enjoy it in a sense and learn from it as we go along with this discussion. Now, we do have a quick thing I want to show you on the screen. I hope you can see that. This is just basically a quick review of how tonight's going to happen. We are doing what we call a justice listening circle. And what we're trying to do is, through the art of listening, we're trying to discern the voice of God on this issue of Black Lives Matter. If you can do the next slide, Leanne. I don't know how to do it from my computer. Basically, those are some of our wonderful young adults. In fact, one of them here is the handsome guy on my far right, right here. He's going to be in the discussion himself. So he's a very wise sage. So I've asked him to come join us. Looking forward, Enrico, to hear what you have to say. But let me just go over some of the steps that we're going to do for this listening circle. First thing we want to do in the listening circle is basically, if you could get that button going there for me, Leanne, is I will introduce the panel with Jordan's help. Then we're going to have a panel discussion. And then from there, we're going to have a Q&A. And then we're going to have a wrap up if we have time. That can wait. Ending thoughts, I call it, if we do have time for that. How to listen well, it'll be important during this time. And let me just give you a couple of little hints or little tips. First of all, respect the panel. They have something to say. They have something to teach you. And I think if we listen to them, we're going to learn a lot. There's a theory called social standpoint theory. And that theory stresses this, that from your social standpoint, from the position of those who, in this case, may face oppression, may face injustice, may face racism, the social standpoint theory says that we can learn the most from their standpoint. So for those of us who are maybe see themselves as a privileged class, we learn from listening to those who are oppressed. They have much to teach us. There's much knowledge that we can learn from this panel, because they're going to share from personal experiences and things that they have experienced. But the wisdom and the knowledge that is unique to their experience is very powerful, because it's not something that we're familiar with for those of us who are white skinned. So we really need to respect the panel. The second thing we need to do as we listen is we need to take on a position of humility with a desire to learn. The third thing I think we need to do is we need to listen and not react. In fact, if there's anything said that you get upset about, acknowledge that emotion, because emotions speak as well. And get a blank piece of paper and write down why you feel this way. Why is your emotions reacting this way? Listen to your emotions, write it down, and it can teach you things and can tell you a lot. And also, if you have questions, please write them down during this time together, and we will have a chance to answer that. And then finally, be willing to take notes, some thoughts, some things that are said could be real gems. So feel free to do that. So Leanne, if you can get rid of that screen, we're going to start with our panel, and I'm going to introduce them. The first one, and my partner in crime, would be Jordan Thoms. Jordan, can you just say a few words, just say a little bit about who you are, tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to be on here with you guys via Zoom and just share and have a discussion and just listen, as Colin has talked about. So yeah, I'm Jordan, and as you heard from Horace earlier, I'm a pastor in the Warden Woods community, which is in Scarborough, and it's a community that I actually was raised up in, and that I still live in, and that I'm have the opportunity to minister in now as a pastor. So I've been in this community for over 20 years, and I'm married. I've been married for 6 years now, and me and my wife have been together since we were 16, and we've known each other since grade 2, and we both grew up in Warden, so that's how we met. And I have a 3-year-old son named Azariah, and I have another son on the way, and he will be born in November, and so we're looking forward to him coming and joining our family. So it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share and hear what others have to say, and hear your questions and just have a good dialogue and conversation.
Thanks, Jordan. Andre Lewis, you're there somewhere. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your family.
Sure. Hopefully you can hear me well. If not, I'll switch my speakers. But my name's Andre Lewis. It's my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate Colin and Jordan inviting me to be a part of this, and for Kingsway-Lambton for putting it on. I think this is an important opportunity to have this discussion. As for me, I'm a big believer and supporter in the ministry of Connect City and Jordan Thoms. And so I know them through the ministry and the work they do. For myself, I was born in Toronto, North York General Hospital, to be specific. In the 70s, my parents were not. And so my family came to Canada from Barbados and Trinidad. And they came at a time, since we're speaking about race, when the Canadian government changed some laws regarding immigration policy. And it started in the 1960s with the Bill of Rights, and they removed literally some overtly racially discriminatory criteria from admissions, and a lot of people from the Caribbean started coming to Canada in the 60s and 70s. And so my family has been here since then. We've lived in southwestern Ontario our whole lives, at least I have. I've between the Greater Toronto area and Kitchener-Waterloo. Now I live in Vaughan. And as far as my family, I have a wife who I met on a plane. We could talk about that later. I have 2 young boys, 6 and 4. And as a day job, I'm a portfolio manager. And that basically means I invest other people's money, and I do it for the credit union system in Canada. So banks that make profit for a purpose. And it's something that I truly enjoy to do. And I also like doing work with Jordan and Colin.
Thank you, Andre. We're going to do a special webinar that Andre is going to lead on how to, for those of you single men, just how to meet women on planes and things like that, because that's how he met his wife. It's a great story, Andre. I love it. That's next week, next Friday at 7 o'clock for all you single males out there. Okay, Enrico and Ashley, I see you guys are sharing the screen. Could you share a little bit about yourself and well, you're not married, you don't have kids, you're young adults, but share a little bit about your story, like who you are, and maybe a little bit about your family.
You can go first. You can go. All right. Hi, as you guys know, my name is Enrico. My full name is Enrico Malukubongo, and I'm original from the Congo, which is the center of Africa. One of the center countries of Africa, and I came to Canada when I was 1 or 2, and coming to Canada was a big struggle because where we lived before, so I was actually born in Italy, and over there it was very hard to come up because my dad was going through some things racially. So like where he was working, the environment was really bad. And so he came to the conclusion of, I don't want my kids to be raised in this country, because he wants to escape this whole racial injustice. And that's when we moved to Canada. And when we first came to Canada, we lived in a shelter for a year, and then we moved to Brampton. We were all over the place in Toronto, but then we settled down in the community I live in now, which is Warden Woods. And Jordan was my neighbor for a very long time when I was a kid. And when I heard that he was starting up his own program, I was kind of like, should I go or should I not go? Because this was like this big scary dude that was living next to me for like when I was like 12, 7 and stuff. And I was just like, should I go? And then when we started going, like, it was like one of the best decisions I made in my life, because he became my mentor and like a big brother to me. Like any issues I had, and when I was going through tough times, say with my parents or my siblings, like that was the first person I'd reach out to. So, and he's the one that baptized me. Was it 2 summers ago? Or last summer? Yeah, last summer I got baptized, and yeah, last summer. Yeah. And now kind of like his sheep, and he's the shepherd, I guess. But yeah, so I'm just chilling.
Rico, you share a little bit quickly here about your podcast.
Oh, okay.
Good chance to promote it here, man.
Yeah. So during the summer, I was working with Connect City, and we started a podcast with them, and that inspired me and my little brother and my other brother from another mother. Okay, but yeah, me and my other brother, we decided to get together and start doing a podcast because we feel like, especially in these times, like our voice is more impactful, and like we are entertaining young men. So we're like, why not start our own podcast? And it's coming soon. It's in the works right now. We have a meeting for it on Sunday. So yeah, I'm really hyped for that.
It's called Underground Voices. You can get it on Apple, Spotify, and SoundCloud. There you go. How's that for promotion? Ashley, good to see you again, my dear. We missed you this summer. You were with us last summer, so I know you're doing some good work elsewhere, and also still working at Canadian Tire?
No.
Oh, I missed you. I always bump into you there.
Yeah, that's not the job for me anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, my name is Ashley. I am 21 in a few weeks. My background is Jamaican and Ukrainian. I currently live in Warden Woods community, same with Enrico. Jordan's mom is my neighbor, so tight-knit community there. I recently just finished school. I was in the addictions and mental health program, so got that out of the way. It's something that I've recently become passionate about. And yeah, like Colin said, I worked with Connect City last summer, which was cool. And this summer I worked with another organization called Urban Promise. And so that was a fun experience for me in the summer. And this school year, I'm going to be joining them as a full-time missionary to kind of just pursue my passion when it comes to mental health and addiction, because we have quite a few scenarios like that in our community that isn't really talked about much often. So yeah, I think my goal for that is to kind of bring about awareness and a program that hopefully aids to youth who are struggling with mental health. And if addiction is a part of that, then that's right up my alley as well. And I live at home with my mom and my sister. I'm the oldest of 3. My youngest sister passed away a few years ago, so it's just me and my mom and my sister, and my dad lives up the street. So I have a close family, I guess you can say, as well.
Thanks, Ashley. That was great, you guys. One of the things you were mentioning, Jordan, is that you have a baby on the way in November, so it's coming up pretty quick. This will be your second boy. Andre, you have 2 boys. As we begin this panel discussion, I think it'd be a good time to ask this question. As a father raising boys, and as a Black father raising Black boys, do you have fears? Do you think of things? Do you concerns and worries as you look at raising, as you are already raising your children? Love to hear your views on that.
Andre, I'll let you go first.
I'm older. I should tell you what. I'm joking. Do I have worries or fears about raising Black children? Definitively, yes. And the reason for that is when I think about the world that they're growing up in, unbeknownst to them, and by no choice of their own, they are going to be judged by the color of their skin and not the contents of their character first. And that's a scary proposition because they're just kids right now. And so right now they're kids and they're going to grow up to be adults, God willing. And my hope is that the world doesn't look like this, but right now it does. And they, like, to be honest with you, even at their young age, we've had experiences in the school system where on multiple occasions, more than one occasion, they've been singled out when it just wasn't appropriate to single them out for behavior. And the good thing about it is it's led us as parents to engage more with the school system and have conversations with people that we probably wouldn't have had this not happened. So I'm going to chalk it up to, this is going to be, it's going to be used for good, but it's not good that they've had these experiences. And that's why I'm concerned, because the world is hostile towards young Black men. It's, to me, a fact. And that's the world they're growing up in. So yes, I am concerned.
It's interesting you said that jokingly, but I think there is a lot of wisdom that, you know, your boys are older than Jordan's. And Jordan, I think you can learn a lot from Andre, because I'm sure you're going to encounter this kind of thing too in the near future for your children as they go through the school system, which is not right and it's tragic. But Andre's a few years ahead of you, so he can help guide you and walk with you on those and share some wisdom. Jordan, how about you as a young father of a second one on the way? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely worried. I definitely have fears. You know, when I think about my experience and what I went through with the system, also with authority like police, when I think about even Andre touched on a little bit with schooling and the things that have happened at school and my experience, but not even just my experiences as well. I look at my peers, my friends that I grew up with. I look at the way people have been singled out and you know, treated differently in my community. All of those things I think about. I think, man, you know, I, like Andre saying, I hope the world is different, but I do feel like, you know, this is something that has happened for so long, and so who's to say that it's gonna change, you know? And so sometimes I do really feel like that, and in terms of kind of those conversations and having it with my kids, like my son's only 3, so I haven't even processed what that's gonna look like yet and how I'm gonna do it because he's so young. You know, he just started daycare this year. But I know that sooner than later, I'm gonna have to have those conversations. And also, you know, even with, you know, employment as well, like I've been in different places of work where I've seen people who, because of their color of their skin, be treated differently or not get jobs based on the color of their skin or even where they lived. And so that's a reality for people like myself in our communities and the Black community. And so I do think that will happen to him. And he and his younger brother will go through those things. But at the same time, I'm hopeful that things will change. And I think what's going on with George Floyd that kind of sparking it, even though it's happened so many years before that, and how the world is responding differently, I feel, at this time. And I think that's a good sign, that things is different this time around, but we'll see in the long term, because this is a long fight. This is gonna be a long process, and so what we see right now is good, but you know, the real victory of that will be in the end, with all of this stuff being torn down, and seeing justice and accountability and equality prevail. So,
Andre and Jordan, just curious, how did your wives feel about this? Have you guys had talked to them about this, or how do they handle it? I wish one of them was on here with us. I'd love to hear the mother's heart, but can you share a little bit of an insight into maybe the mother's heart on all of this? I know as a father, you become protective and maybe, angry, righteous anger, but I'm just kind of curious about, and maybe you can't answer this, but if you can, how does your wives, these mothers, take this and deal with this? Because we have so many moms in our neighborhoods that we're working with. We're working with their kids, and I hear some of their heartbeats for their children. But can you share a little bit, as a husband of wonderful women, wonderful wives, what's going on in their hearts?
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've had conversations with my wife about this, and talking to her, like, she's very sensitive to what's going on, and to these things that are happening. So like, she's become numb to it, which is, it's kind of sad to say, but it's like, that's where she's at. So she sees these videos that pop up and these hashtags and stuff, and so when she sees the video, like on social media or whatever, she can't even watch it anymore. She can't even watch them because of what it is in her heart, to the point where, like, she, like, it's unhealthy for her physically. She feels it deep, and it's sad because she has people in her family, aunties and stuff like that, grandma, who have been victims of these things and who have lost children due to things very similar to what we're seeing in the news. And to see how they've dealt with it, she's kind of accustomed to it firsthand. So she tries to block it out as much as she can. That doesn't mean not addressing it and talking about it and thinking and living in a way where it's not happening, but just physically and health-wise, she just tries, she deals with it on her own and tries to ignore those things because of what she's witnessed in the past with her family, and seeing it so much, it's just not good for her health-wise. So yeah, I mean, obviously she thinks that it's wrong. She thinks that it's unjust. She thinks that things need to change. And she processes a lot of it with me, but kind of beyond that and having conversations with other people and stuff, she rather kind of stay away from it because of really the trauma and the pain that it does to her heart physically. So,
Andre, how about you?
I'd say similar to Jordan. And like you said, I wish Fanta was here. She's with the kids right now, actually. But it's painful. It's really painful. It's one thing to experience racism directly, but I think it's another to see it happen to someone else who is more helpless than you. And especially the experience, I'll go back to my story about the school. The school, it's, you send your kids to school to be cared for and to be treated, and to think that these things would happen in the school where they're treated less than, they're demeaned. It really, really, really hurts. But I like what Jordan said. We are learning, and I know my wife is, because she had a very unique experience with one of the teachers at the school, where we're learning to be hopeful. We're learning to remember that God is in control, that he turns, he makes beauty out of ashes, all right? And we now have a very unique relationship with one of the teachers, because Fanta felt that it was important to speak out and to say something. And at first it didn't go well, but over time, that relationship has now grown to a place where the teacher has thanked her for bringing these things up and sharing with her how she felt. And so to me, I really like that Jordan brought in the hopeful part, because it's true. All of this is very troubling, but because we know that God is in control, we can find hope in these situations. And sometimes it takes longer to come than others. For us, it took probably a couple of years at school, literally a couple of years, but things are looking better, at least in that situation. And we're hoping that that's kind of a model or an archetype for other things in our lives that deal with this issue and other issues, quite frankly.
That's amazing. Like I just, as a father myself, like my heart breaks over some of the young people we minister to, but I'm not their fathers. You know, they're not my direct children. I see them in many ways as my children, and I care and love them so much. It hurts me when I hear their stories. But as a father, this is going on with my own children. I have to tell you, I really admire you. It's a burden you shouldn't have to carry, but you're carrying it well, both of you guys. And I'm just inspired that you guys have the patience to deal with that, because as a father, I'm sure you just want to lash out sometimes. And yeah, but the way you talk about your faith, Andre, and just how you know that God's in control and He'll work it out, and you're working with God to change people's hearts. That's a note right there. Take a note on that one, you know, as good wisdom, right, in this conversation. So I appreciate what you say. Ashley and Enrico, I'm curious. I'm going to start with Ashley, and then maybe, I'm going to start with Enrico, and then maybe Ashley can jump in. But Enrico, you're a young Black man, and you're at that age where in some ways, you got a target on your back more than anybody else, I think, from what I've seen in regards to the police and things like this and stereotypes. There's been times I know that you've had to deal with injustice towards yourself. And I'm interested in what Andre said. Like, how do you deal with that anger? How do you deal when you get oppressed, when you get put down, when something that is totally wrong happens to you? How do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? And maybe you can share an instance where that's happened and then how you dealt with it. Could you share something along those lines, Enrico? By the way, I gave these guys questions before we started, and none of these questions that I'm talking now are on that list, just because it's the way the conversation is going. So Enrico, you can stutter a little bit with an answer to this, but if you can share a situation where something was done to you that wasn't right because of the color of your skin, and I'm curious, how do you deal with that?
You know, first of all, with a lot of patience, like extreme patience.
Hey, Enrico, can you speak a little bit louder? I can hear you, but I don't know if everybody else can. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Well, first I said a lot of patience, like extreme patience, because as humans, like giving into our emotions sometimes could be really bad. And my experience as a young Black male, I'd say it started when I reached the age of 7, maybe even a little bit younger, because I just grew freakishly tall. Like I was just like always one of the tallest people in my class, and sometimes like I'd be viewed as an older gentleman, and by teachers or by even like random strangers on the street. I remember one of the microaggressions I went through, and microaggressions is like, I guess, subtle racism or like nice racism, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but one of the microaggressions I went through is like when I was in I think grade 4, we were playing dodgeball, and then I threw the ball a little bit stronger than all the other kids. Then they're like, you need to play softer, and I was like, why? And then the teacher just looked at me like, you know why you need to play softer. And then it just became worse and worse. And even in high school, I remember I got fouled really hard. I was on the basketball team, and the referee told me, you can shrug it off. Your people are used to this type of physical contact. Like, it's not a foul. Like, keep playing. So things like that is just like the first thing that pops into my head is like, no, I'm going to say something. I'm going to get angry. I'm going to tell them, no, I have my rights. But like, I'm just going to get in a bigger punishment for something I didn't do. So a lot of times I found myself in detention for things I didn't do. I found myself even getting grounded by my parents because the teacher would call home. And in my African household, if a teacher calls home, you're automatically in trouble. The teacher shouldn't be calling home. So, and this was 3 years ago. This is one of the most traumatic things that's ever happened to me in my whole life. Even thinking about it right now, kind of choking up on some tears and stuff. I just finished my shift at Cineplex, and I was waiting on the stairs at Indigo, listening to some music. And then there's this, I'd say, wealthy man walking, and he wanted to go inside the Indigo. And I had my earphones in, so I couldn't hear him. And he was trying to tell me to move, but I had a long day at work, and I was so tired. And he kicked me, so I took out my earphones, and I was like, oh, sorry. And then he spat on me and called me a nigger and went on his way. At that time, like, there was a lot of things going through my head. Like, I never imagined myself being in that position. I never thought that that could happen to me. I was just like, we're in Canada. Like, we're not in America. Like, these are things I would see on TV. And if I'm being completely honest with myself, at that time, I wanted to physically hurt someone, like, extremely, like, bad. It was just, I was so angry. I was so confused. Like, I knew if I called the police, I would potentially lose my life. All these things were just going through my head. I remember going home crying uncontrollably, telling my mom and my dad. My dad started crying too, because he was like, this is what we tried to run from, and it's happening here. And everybody was just baffled. My two younger siblings that were, I think, 6, no, not even 6, they were probably 5 at the time. They were confused. They didn't know what happened. They thought I did something wrong because I mentioned the police, and then my brother was just like, why didn't you call the police? And I said I couldn't. And they were just confused. So that led into another conversation with them at a young age to tell them necessarily the police is not here to protect you. And all of these conversations, I had to give, and just been through this whole summer. I found myself in a state of like, why? Why do I have to go through these things? Why do my people have to have, why do we have to look across the street every time we see the policeman? Why do we have to feel this sense of instability when there's a crowd full of white people? Why do I have to feel this way? Why do I have to go through these conversations, like potentially with my children when I become a father? Why do I have to do these things? Why do I have to be so uncomfortable in my own skin? And I just found myself like crying out to God, because at that time I felt so hopeless that there is no one on earth that can ease this pain that I'm going through right now. And God just told me to be patient. Respond to those people with love. When they spit on you, you reach out for a hug, because violence only begets violence. So that's why, like, I even find myself lunging to these conversations, because I know if I keep myself quiet, that anger and that hate that I felt that night can easily come back up. With all these videos that I'm watching, it's the same feeling coming back up. the same exact feeling of like, I can't believe that this is still happening to people that look exactly like me. And
You know,
that's,
Rico,
that's, yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done, but you keep talking, my brother.
Yeah, with that fear that like Jordan and Andre feel for like their children, I feel that exact same way for my younger siblings.
Yeah.
Like every time they walk out the door, if it's for camp or for school, because I'm bilingual, I speak French, and all the schools I've been through were predominantly white. And so, same thing for my younger brothers and sisters. And even when we go pick them up now for school and we come in the car, we have to park in a different section than the other people, because I'm not even gonna lie, sometimes we be bumping music a little bit too loud. But I see a lot of other parents doing it too, just because we're listening to rap and they're listening to pop. I don't see why we have to be treated differently. So it's just these little things that I have to go through, and I wish that I will have to stop going through by the time I'm 50.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you said something there about what you went through, getting kicked on the steps, being told the N-word, and you couldn't even phone the police. Like, I think that explains some of the struggle that the Black community faces. And part of the struggle between the police and the Black community is you're scared of what the police could do to you. Like you have no recourse, and that must build up so much anger and anger and anger. But what also you said that really touched me was it affects your whole family. Not only were you deeply wounded to the point of tears, and we see that now on the screen, it still hurts after all these years, but then your father too, and your mother most likely, and then your little siblings. Man, like it's just a domino effect of pain. And so this to me just shows again how horrible racism is, how horrible it is to judge people by the color of their skin. Thank you for sharing that, because I know that still hurts. I really do. I know that still hurts. It makes me upset, but again, what makes me upset is that you have no recourse other than God, which is the best recourse around, and close friends. Ashley, you're a beautiful young woman, and I'm kind of curious about hearing what you have to say along with those questions, like racism, if you've experienced. I believe you're from a mixed background, right?
Right, I'm biracial.
Yeah, with your mom and dad. How have you sensed it, the racism within your family or towards yourself, and how as a woman, how do you deal with that? Because you're not only dealing with racism, but you're also dealing with sexism in some ways too as a woman. So I'm kind of curious to hear.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Please share.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm biracial. My mother is white and my father is Black. And in terms of racism, obviously it's a prominent thing in the world and also in my life as well. But I think the most intense form of racism that I personally experience is through microaggressions. So kind of like Enrico was saying, it's kind of like indirect racism, and it can be done unintentionally as well. I've experienced microaggressions towards me from some friends of mine as well who are white, and it's not always because they are trying to intentionally hurt you. It's just sometimes people are ignorant unknowingly, and so I always say, like, it's okay to be ignorant if you're unaware, because that's just an opportunity for me to educate you, and if you're truly my friend, you'll take that as an act of love and not an act of malice and such. But yeah, I think just mainly like microaggressions, like the simplest things. I think even, like, can I touch your hair, or you're pretty for a Black woman. Like why can't we just be pretty in general? Like, why does it have to be for a Black woman, or like I said, like, can I touch your hair? Like, why is your hair curly one day, straight the next day? Like, it's little things that I think, like, yes, we need to talk about the bigger things, but it's also the little things that people don't pay attention to, that can have long lasting effects. on people, specifically Black people. And so that's why I'm always like eager to speak up about it, especially in my friend groups, because I have a pretty diverse friend group. And I, unfortunately, like throughout this time period of like back from January to up until now, I've lost quite a few friends, some of my white friends, because they just refuse to acknowledge the fact that there's an issue with what's going on in the world right now. And I think also the question, like, how did we get here? Like how did this happen? And it's not so much of like, how did we get here? It's why do we continue to let it happen? Because even from back in the day, like slavery and racism, like, yes, it may like legally have stopped. It hasn't changed though. You know, racism hasn't taken a break. It's been a consistent thing for generations upon generations upon generations up until this point. And I don't think it'll be something that's going to be completely abolished anytime soon, which is unfortunate, but it's simply the truth. And so yeah, it kind of brings frustration to me, because it's hard to I don't know, it's hard to converse with those who just simply don't want to like understand what's happening or are against trying to solve what's happening. And that goes with, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement. Again, it's not that all lives don't matter, but in this particular moment, Black lives need to be focused on more so. And like back with the friends thing, like I've had people message me like, you know, like why are you so against like white people? Like why are you so against the police? Why are you? And I'm just like, you're not understanding. And so it's an opportunity to educate. And I think even with the defund the police, I'm not sure if any of you have heard that phrase being thrown around. People often get that confused as well. It's not that we want to take away the police system or get rid of them. It's we want to take the funds that are being put into them and redistribute where those funds are going. Like put them into programs that support Black people, put them into programs for our youth, our next generation, because those are the people who are really gonna take the future and possibly make a change for the better. Because obviously our generations haven't done that yet. Generations before us haven't been able to do that. So it's always, you know, good to put the hope in the next generation. And yeah, and I think it's frustrating. And I'm not saying all police officers are bad people. But, and with what I'm about to say, people may disagree. It's just simply how I feel though. I'm not against police officers individually. But when you wake up in the morning, if you're a police officer and you put that badge on, there's a lot of oppression behind that badge. Whether you are an oppressor yourself, whether you are for Black lives and you're a police officer, when you wear that badge, that system is in a sense corrupt. It's supporting those who oppress in a sense, you know, and people behind that system are those who are also killing innocent Black people. And just another thing, there was the gentleman who was shot 7 times recently, and he didn't die, he was paralyzed, but there was talk around it like, you know, but he was a criminal though, and like, you know, he had a bad background, and like the fact that that's even like, who cares if, like, yes, he's a criminal or whatever the case may be, but does that mean that he deserves to be shot? Does that mean that he deserves to die? No, it doesn't matter what your background is. If you are not a threat in that moment, why is a gun being drawn? You know, and one shot is enough to harm anybody, let alone 7 of them. You know, and it's just unreasonable things like that I think frustrate a lot of people. And yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but there's just a whole bunch of emotion.
Well, no, actually what you're saying is, I think you're revealing your heart and the toll it takes on you when you see this stuff in the media, when you hear these things, when you watch your people, in many ways, people who look like you, as Enrico says, you know, this is like, it must take a mental toll, a stress on you. Because I know it does on me, but I would think it'd be multiplied 100 times on you guys as well. Just the toll that must take on you as you see these things and the frustration. And I often say, you know, people say to me, look at all these riots and stuff. And well, the riots are a sign of frustration that's been built up over years and years and years. And if people aren't listening, people get upset. And so I understand where you're coming from. It frustrates me too to see that. I've got a question. I'm gonna go back to Andre and then back to Jordan to hear what he has to say, and then back to you guys. And then I'm looking at the clock. I wish we had more time, but it's already 8 o'clock. I want to leave space for some Q&A. But maybe we can't even hit all 4 of you in this question. But Andre, what would you, in all honesty, no holds barred, my brother, what do you have to say to the white brothers and sisters who are listening in? How can, I'll tell you my bias. Personally, this whole situation we're living in today is not a black issue. It shouldn't be a black issue. It is a white issue. The reason, the problem with systemic racism is because white folks haven't dealt with it. We're responsible for it. We're responsible for systemic racism. And we haven't done anything about it. I'm speaking as white people as a whole. Those who are in positions of opportunity or white privilege, we have not, we haven't looked in the mirror and we haven't seen the white privilege and we haven't said to ourselves, this is wrong. Because it's wrong that I don't have, well, it's right that I don't have to tell my kids the things you have to tell your kids. It's wrong that you have to tell your kids that. It's wrong that you have to carry that burden to teach them to when you're going to be stopped by the police and this is how you have to handle yourself. I've never had those talks with my kids and they're all grown up. I haven't had to do the talks that you guys will or have already done with your children, and that's so terrible. You shouldn't have to do that. But then I need to look in the mirror and go, why is it that I'm okay with you guys having to go through that and I don't have to go through it? It's not right that I'm okay with that. And so I want to hear what you have to say, because to me, systemic racism is a white problem, because we have the chance and we have the power to change it, and we haven't over all these years. But I'm kind of curious, what do you have to say to white folks? To people, and not just white folks, there's people of color here listening that do have that power where they can make a change in their workplaces or in with the police. What can you tell us? And Andre, you're frozen. I don't know if you're frozen with everybody else. Jordan, let's skip to you until Andre comes back online. Jordan, can you share? Sorry, Andre, I got to cut you off because you're frozen. Jordan, can you share what's your advice for white folks in this situation?
My advice for white folks would be, you know, it's interesting with all these conversations that have come up, and especially it being enhanced with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and all these that have happened recently. In my conversations that I've had with white folks, or, you know, just, yeah, like you said, it's not just exclusive to white people. I've also had conversations with Asians, you know, all these people, all different types of people. But the thing I keep hearing all the time is we don't say anything or we don't address it because we're afraid we're going to say something that's going to be hurtful or something, we're not going to say the right thing. And I understand that at the same time, but I also think it's kind of an excuse as to not engage and to have these conversations, because if you do say something, like Ashley had said earlier, if you do say something that comes off as offensive or as rude or ignorant, then we look at that as something, okay, we can just educate you on this. We're not going to lash out at you because of this, because you're actually engaging in a conversation and having dialogue about it instead of being silent. So I would encourage all people to not be silent and actually engage in conversation with people. And don't be afraid that you may say something offensive, because if you do, hopefully those who you're talking to will see it as something that, you know, you're just unaware of, but that you identify that this is a problem, that this is unjust, and that you want to contribute to helping it and destroying it. And so, you know, they will respond in love, and they will respond in educating you and letting you know, hey, you know what, that may have came off a little bit wrong, but you know, it's okay because I understand where you're coming from. So let me, you know, how about you take this route with this next time, you know? And it could be a great time of just understanding, like we're talking here, listening and understanding. We can't have any listening if it's just like if you're not talking. Like we got to learn also from other people, you know. Why do you feel like this is not an issue, or why do you feel like you shouldn't say anything? Like we would like to understand those things too. We don't have the answers to those things, and we can't get them if people are quiet and not talking. So that would be one. Just don't be afraid to engage and have those conversations, and don't be afraid to think, oh, and don't let the reasoning be, I may say something that's ignorant or offensive, or I don't even know what to say. And if you really do feel like I don't know what to say, then start the conversation off with, hey, listen, I understand what's going on. I'm seeing it on my TV, on all the screens in my house, at work. People are talking about this. I really don't know what to say. I don't know what to contribute. Let that be known up front, and then just whatever happens naturally after that in the conversation, let it flow. And you'll be surprised at where it takes you and how much that helps with us who feel like people are not being allies or just brushing it off because it doesn't directly affect you and your household or your community, or your workplace or whatever it may be. So I would say that, and then also just I think people, and again, this is not exclusive to white people. This is also for Black people as well. For everyone, would just be like, when it comes to these issues, like you have to be willing to be shot at. You have to be willing to take on a negative reputation from others, because there's going to be people that oppose what's going on, or just straight out disrespectful or racist or ignorant, or just, again, like systemically and all this stuff, it doesn't affect them. And they're going to say, how can you, you know, why are you helping these people, or why are you speaking up for this? You're supposed to be one of us, or whatever may happen. But like, don't be afraid to take on that negative reputation from others. Like if you really believe that this is an injustice, if you really believe that there needs to be change, if you really believe that there needs to be accountability in the court of law, and all of these things, then it's not a race issue like Colin has said. It's a justice issue. It's just flat out wrong. So if you identify it as something that's wrong, then let's do something about it. And whatever your platform may be, whether you're a school teacher, you're a janitor, whatever it is, wherever you are, you can use that platform to talk about these things and have these kind of listening circles and have these conversations about these things. And then just like when you see things that's wrong, call it out. Like, don't be silent about it. Address it. And again, you may be persecuted for that. You may be outcasted for that. But I think that's something that all of us have to take on if we truly believe that this is wrong and that it needs to be fixed. So
I think I like what you said about it is a racial issue, but it's not, because when you go below the surface, it's just a moral issue.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? It's a human sin issue.
Yeah.
Black, white, green, yellow. The issue is it's wrong. Period. It's evil. It's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. At the root of it, it's a moral issue. It's a sin issue, like you're saying, and it manifests itself in different ways, like race.
Yes.
Like in the system and all these kinds of things. So yeah.
Ashley and Rico, give us some of your wisdom. What would you say to those so-called people who have positions of power, maybe because of the color of their skin, or white privilege, things like that? Oh, by the way, everybody, sorry, before I give you guys a chance to think, just a reminder, we're going to do some Q&A. After Ashley, Trey's saying that 5 times fast. After Ashley and Rico share a little bit about what they have to say to the rest of us in regards to things we can do and respond, we will have the Q&A. So get those questions ready. You can send them through the chat line, and then I believe Leanne will sort of take over from there. Maybe including me, I don't know, Leanne, it's up to you. But Ashley and Enrico, please just give us quick thoughts on what you think we can learn from you in regards to responding properly to this issue?
Yeah, kind of just piggybacking like on what Jordan said, just, make sure you're being vocal, ask questions, talk about it. Like for instance, like, if you're in a room full of white people and there's something negative being said about a Black person or Black people in general, and not one Black person is in that room, be that person to stand up and say something and say that you're not okay with what was just said, like stick up for us when we're not in the room. Something as simple as that is it has a big impact on the situation. And just, yeah, like there's in a time, like in a world where Google is so accessible, it comes to a point when not knowing is just simply unacceptable. The simplest things, like, you can Google, like, how can I ask this question? How can I address this situation? Like, I'm sure if you do that, many things will come up, especially now. I think there's a lot of forums out there helping, which sounds weird, but like helping white people help Black people. You know what I'm saying? Like, it sounds weird to say that, but it's like I get it, you're uncomfortable, but you need to be uncomfortable. Because if you're not uncomfortable, you're not going to move. You're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be stuck in that same ignorant mindset. And so, we're uncomfortable our whole lives because of the color of our skin, because of the situations that we're put in, and we're forced to be that way. While a lot of white people just sit back and are comfortable, and I'm like, oh, that's an intense situation, but it's not involving me, so I'm going to sit back. And like, as Christians, it's just simply not okay. When God's people are in need, like, go out and help them. And kind of like Colin and Jordan both said, it's not a race issue, it's a humanity issue. White, Black, any color, like, it's simply wrong. Whether this was happening with Black people or brown people or Asian people, which it is, it's not just Black people, but it's a humanity issue that needs to be addressed. And yeah, just, I don't know, just keep talking about it. And there's also things that you can do, like sign petitions, like when it comes to education, history class, they don't teach a lot of Black history, if you realize. Go up to a high schooler and ask them what they've learned in history class. You'll hear about John A. Macdonald. You'll hear about all of these white people who did something good for Canada, and it's like, yeah, that may be true, but look at the list of Black people who have contributed to the country we live in now. It's not talked about as much as it should be, and there's petitions to sign to get that fixed. There's simple things like that you can do. Even like, if any of you are on social media, a post about it, just simple things like that, I think, is also beneficial. If you don't know what to do, there's basic things like that are always there.
Rico's going to share some of his thoughts, and then we're going to do a Q&A. And I can go on a bit later than 8:30 if people want to stick around, but feel free to leave anytime you want after 8:30. We understand that you may have other plans. But Rico, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to say something, might be a little bit heavy, but people's comfortability is what is killing Black people.
Just say that again and say it loud.
White people's comfortability is killing Black people. Comfortability. Comfortability, yeah. The comfortability of white people is killing Black people. The comfortability of not talking, of not saying anything, of I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to go outside and feel at ease. That is what is killing Black people. So in that case, one party needs to be uncomfortable, and that is the Black people. We're uncomfortable everywhere we go. We're uncomfortable of what we say, how we dress, and even how we do our hair. All of these things make us uncomfortable. And it's going to take white people to be uncomfortable for a really long time for us to feel somewhat uncomfortable. I mean, somewhat comfortable. what I have to say is we need more white people that are in position of power, or even white people that are not. It's going to take all groups of higher class, middle class, and lower class for this comfortability to really make everybody at the same level. Because quite frankly, like, if I'm being honest, I'm tired of having these conversations over a laptop and talking about my traumas, because I might not sleep well tonight because of these stories that I've said, and that creates PTSD. And I don't know how many other kids that are younger than me that have PTSD of if they hear a firecracker. Like for me, like if I hear a firecracker, it's potentially gunshot, or to the point where you can't tell the difference between a firecracker and a gunshot because you hear it so many times. I don't know how many times I sit outside my front porch, and if you just stay quiet, you hear police sirens before you hear crickets, and that's just so crazy to me. So what white people can do is simply be Christian to us. And it sounds crazy, but just be Christian to us, because the best activist, or in my eyes, is Jesus Christ. He was someone that was really about, like, if I see some social injustice, I'm going to talk about it. Like the Samaritan woman at the well. That situation right there was frowned upon. Other people were seeing Jesus with a Samaritan woman, and they're like, what is he doing? Does he know who he is and who she is? That's what I see with white people and black people.
Profound stuff. It's hard to choose to be uncomfortable when you're comfortable. And I think I love what you said, because I think that's a huge challenge for those who prosper from white privilege. The other thing is, people who prosper from white privilege don't realize that they have this privilege because they don't know black people. They don't have friends who are black. They're not in black neighborhoods. And so I'm just going to add a little thing there for people, is we need to befriend people of color, people from different cultures. And we need to, that for me makes me uncomfortable, not befriending you guys, because I love you guys. It's easy for me to befriend people of color, but the more I see and experience and live with you, I begin to feel the trauma that you mentioned, and I begin to see the injustice. And I've seen the police come and do things to, I call them my people, my young people, because of the color of the skin. And the weird thing is, when I show up and go, they're with me, all of a sudden the police back down. And I see this injustice to the point I nearly got arrested one time, sticking up for my people. Yeah, I always want to challenge the listeners there to befriend and be true friends that listen to people who are going through things that we don't go through because of the color of our skin and because of the color of their skin. Then you'll begin to learn and experience and see your friends being treated badly. And that's when you get uncomfortable. You know, for me, I look at you guys, and I look at you, Rico. I've known you for 3-4 years now. When you say things like you told us tonight, that hurts me. That makes me uncomfortable. And so I think this thing about friendship, and Jordan, you talked about listening to one another, really listening and speaking out and asking questions. It's so important. So I appreciate some of your answers. I've got to jump to the Q&A because I'm looking at the clock, and we got 15 minutes. And like I said, I'm willing to go longer if we have to. But Leanne, take it away from here. You lead the next phase in this discussion.
Well, first of all, let me just share with you that my chat is blowing up with people who just want to say thank you so much for honoring us by sharing your experiences and your lives, and also your time with us tonight. So I know I'm not the only one who is saying a hearty amen and a hearty thank you to all of you. So let me just say that on behalf of all the people who are sending it to me in the chat right now. I think the one question, we have many, so I'm going to try to condense some of them together, but one that we'll start with is the question of the church's role in this and in addressing anti-racism. So there have been a few questions on this. One is, wondering, what can the church be doing, and shouldn't the church be leading the way? And also, have you experienced spaces where the church has failed to be actively anti-racist, to address racism, even within its own structures? And also just that has impact for how we are living out our lives as Christians, and doesn't show that we are living as Christians called to love God and love our neighbors. So we'd love some of your thoughts on that. I know people are also anxious to hear from Andre. So maybe we'll start with you, Andre, if you're good with that.
I think the question
Sure.
for Andre is to hear, he had something to say about advice or wisdom to the last question we had for the rest of us. So Andre, go ahead. I think he's frozen again.
Yeah, he froze.
He's frozen again.
All right.
Either Leanne is freezing him on purpose, or no, she's not doing that. She's
I
awesome.
promise I'm not that good on technology. Well,
I'll talk to Andre privately later on, just to let him know. Let me jump into this question. I'm going to tell a crazy experience I had, which is weird because I'm a white guy. Then Jordan, you're a pastor, and maybe you can ask or answer this, get some thoughts on how can the church be leading the way when it comes to these issues. Let me share my experience of racism. I had a job interview, and I did really well to be a pastor at a church a few years back. And when it was all said and done, I didn't get the job. And this is the reason why. They said, your experience has been only with Black people. So we don't want a pastor that's been working with Black people for the last 20 plus years. I was like, what? I mean, I'm being discriminated because I'm working with Black people. And so that was an instance of, one of the questions was, how have you seen the church blow it? How have you seen the church discriminate? I mean, I was flabbergasted, but that was an instance that I experienced as a white person, that this church that was saying, oh, you know, you'd be great, you know, we love you, we love how you speak, but, you know, your experiences with Black people, and we're not looking for that. Like, come on, man. So that's my experience of some discrimination within the church. But Jordan, what's the solution? How can the church lead the way?
Yeah, so a few things. You talk about how the church.
It's hard to answer this one quickly, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, okay, so should the church be leading the way? Definitely, yes, amen. We should be leading the way. When you talk about how's the church blowing it, Colin has shared a little bit of a story, but also it's just like, we've become so very institutional and so rule and law based that we exclude others based on the standards of tradition, on the standards of what our church believes, you know, what these kinds of things. And yeah, so we put people in a box, you know, they're in and out. So for example, you know, I remember one time in Warden, there was a church there. It was a drive-in church. They didn't do anything for the community. And me and a couple of other people went to this church, and we walked in a little bit late, and we were dressed in our normal clothes, you know, jeans, pants, shirt, whatever it is. Everyone was dressed in suits and nice. And the pastor stood up in front of everyone while we walked in and told us that we had to leave the church because we weren't dressed. Okay. Okay, I'm doing something. Okay. Sorry, my son. And yeah, they basically said that they said you need to leave because we're not dressed right to be in the house of the Lord. A girl that was with us, she had purple hair and all of these things. And because of these standards and these things that different people held, it was, we have to look a certain way. We have to know certain lingo, all these kinds of things. And so they kicked us out of the church. You know, other churches, you know, depending on traditions and things that they hold very dear and that they emphasize, will exclude you as well. We do a lot of excluding and not including. And so, for example, I've been to another church, and you know, they asked me if I like spoke in tongues or if I have different kind of gifts in the spirit. And because I said no, then that means I don't have the Holy Spirit. I don't have a relationship with God based on those things, because they hold that so very dear to them. And so we got to stop excluding people based on these things, because when we look at the life of Jesus and how he lived, he did not do any of that. In fact, people, the religious people actually specifically, called him a drunkard and a glutton, and even called him a devil. They called him Beelzebub, because he was hanging around all the people that the religious people had excluded because of the laws that they added to the Mosaic laws and all of these things, and saying you have to first look like this or not do this, or if you're a tax collector, you're not allowed to worship, in the synagogue. And if you fellowship with a tax collector, you become unclean and you're excluded. So we got to stop excluding people and look at Jesus, and even take on those names that other people will call those people, because we're including them, because the gospel is inclusive. And so, there's so many different instances of that. You just read the gospels and you'll just see all of these stories of Jesus being around people who are sick, who are unhealthy, that have been excluded by the religious or by the system, by Rome, who was the empire at that time, and who they were enslaved to and oppressed under, and all of these things. And you just see Jesus the whole time tackling it, dismantling it, and that ultimately led to his death. And so I'm not saying that we're not doing the right thing unless we're being imprisoned or we die. But that should be in the back of our minds. Like, if we truly believe something is wrong, and we're living out and reflecting Jesus, who is our Lord and our King, that those things could end up happening. And if we believe that these things is wrong, like Jesus does, and that he clearly showed us wrong and tackled, then that may be an outcome. And that's something I'm willing to take. And that's not just for the Black community, but that's just all people anywhere. When I see something that is wrong, and I think, like you said, this word has come up so much, we just become so comfortable because it doesn't directly affect us. But Jesus came and he made a lot of people uncomfortable, even his own people, where they rejected him, they outcasted him as well, and they conspired to kill him, and that's what they did. So I mean, there's so many instances. I can walk through different parables that he talked
We'll
about.
do that on Sunday.
Where he's addressed these things, like, yeah. So yeah.
I think what you're saying, and Rico, I want to jump into you for a second here, but Rico mentioned Jesus as the ultimate example, a role model of someone who was able to deal with systemic injustice. I think the church has to keep their eye on Jesus more than anything else. And Jesus says to the disciples, "Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of people." And then all of a sudden, where does Jesus take them? Where, if you're following Jesus, you're going to go to the fringes. You're going to go to the oppressed. You're going to go to the poor. You're going to go to the rejected. You're going to go to those who are hurting. That's where Jesus takes us. And I wonder if the church is following Jesus, because if the church isn't on the front lines of these issues, then they're not following Jesus, because that's where Jesus is. That's where Jesus takes us. Jesus says, if you've done it to the least of these, to the hurting, to the oppressed, to the poor, you're doing it unto me. So we're preaching here, Jordan. We're preaching here. It's good. Rico, tell us. I mean, I know you talked about Jesus as this model, and if we're talking how the church can lead the way, we're supposed to be followers of Jesus. Preach with some stuff here with us, Rico. Teach us, my brother.
When it comes to the church leading the way, like, it's as simple as what you said, just following Jesus. Like, study him in the Bible. Really just study what he does, his aneurysms and everything. Because when I took time to really be inside my Bible, like a real Jesus freak, I found myself acting different. I found myself putting myself in some situations where I would never see myself in, but I would see Jesus in. And that's just how the church is supposed to act. They're supposed to act outside themselves. The church is supposed to be something that they would never see themselves as, and that is acting like Jesus. I feel like the church should be so much like Jesus. Like, at the end of the day, when they get back home, they're like, what did we just do? Like, did we really go out there and like scream at the top of our lungs, Lives Matter? Did we just do that? Did we just raise enough money to help this family down the street? Did we really go to that person that we saw struggling with an addiction to some substance drug and we brought them back to their feet? Like, these are the things that I want to see in a church that I go to. These are the things that I feel like Jesus was calling us to be. Because when I see church, I see family. Because that's how Jesus acted with his disciples. And that's when I read when he was preaching to the masses, and there would be, like, I'll never forget that story when they put a hole through the roof to bring down their paralyzed friend. And the disciples were looking like, did they really just do that? And Jesus was just like, no, let him come and I will make him walk. And all of these things that I see Jesus doing was so out of character for that time. And that's what the church should be. Like, I should see like headlines of the church is doing things that regular people don't do. But I feel like the church nowadays has become the regular people. Because you don't hear outstanding headlines of the church has done this. The church has become so part of a system of, we go to church on Sunday, we sell a bit of cookies, we, get that good soul food of, yeah, I'm going to do something, and that lasts for that hour of church, and then Monday it's back to the 9 to 5, and then it repeats. It's not something that brings people to worship. I'm not talking about like singing worship. I'm talking about living our lives for Jesus, true worship. That's what the church should be doing. And that's how us Christians should be living nowadays, worshiping Jesus to the fullest.
Let me throw some scripture at you from James. I think it's chapter 1, where it says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is to visit widows and orphans in distress. It's not to have a cool worship band. It's not to have a big church building. It's to visit, befriend, love widows and orphans in their distress. And the word widows actually means single mothers. So you're right on, brother. To be Jesus, to act like Jesus, to speak like Jesus, to see things like Jesus. We are the body of Christ. So, okay, Leanne, another question. I'm looking at this clock. We're already at 8:30.
We're at 8:30, so this will be our last one for tonight. But I think one of the things I know I'm taking away from this is the invitation to continue to lean in, to listen, to learn, to take action. So even though this is our last question, this is not the end of the journey, the discussion, and all of the growth that God is doing in our lives in bringing us to action to help end racism that we see in the world. So last question is, if we could hear from each of the panelists on what is one thing that you hope for in seeing change in the future. This could be as concrete as something here in Toronto. What would be a tangible example of change, or on a grander scale than that? But I'll kick it to all of you for what would be a vision of hope, and that you would, when you see it, you'll say, that's change.
Is Andre there? We'll start with him.
I think I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are here, my friend.
Oh, okay. Man, I don't know what happened. Sorry about that. I think my kids are on Netflix and eating up the bandwidth or something. I think this kind of links to the other question that I heard being discussed about, what should white people do? I think ultimately what I would hope is that, and Colin hit on it, is that like Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 12, I think it is, he says, it's using the analogy of being a body, and he says, if one part of the body suffers, we all suffer. And I think that's what I'd love to see from the church. That's what I'd love to see in this city. This is what I'd love to see in this province, in the country, in the world, that we're just rallying around people that are suffering. Because I don't know if we can ever eradicate people harming other people. But what we can definitely add is people helping people, is people rallying around those that are hurting. And I think right now, the Black community is hurting. The Indigenous community is hurting. People of color are hurting. And I think if that's true, then the beauty of it is I think Christ is calling us to rally around them. And so the question I ask, I guess there's two questions. One, why haven't we done anything yet? And two, if we were to ask God, and we probably should, because I'm asking myself the same question, what is it that you want me to do? How do you want me to help bring healing? And so I think those are two things if we ask ourselves, we may get some answers.
It's good.
Well, what I would like to see, when I do see it, I'll be like, things are changing. I would say, like, because through this whole time, these difficult times with my people hurting, the two things that have been like a big issue in our in the Black community is financial freedom and our mental state, and that's just because of how the system is built. So as soon as I see more Black entrepreneurs or just Black people that are not just down, or like seeing Black people actually going to a therapist or Black therapists and stuff like that. Honestly, I feel like that is just like that's a dream to me. Just seeing like financial freedom for the people, and just we have more opportunities to have great to show to give to the world. Because I've recently found out that there's a lot of black inventors, just nobody knows about it. So as soon as I see especially the Toronto District School Board fix up whatever they're doing right now, as soon as I see that happening, then yeah, I'll be like, things are changing. Yeah.
I think for me, I just think in general, we need reform in the justice system. So, you know, if that comes down to like, I guess, yeah, like what I want to see specifically is like every officer who is a part of the Toronto Police District or any policing, whatever the case may be, like I want to see new and improved training. I want to see de-escalation training specifically, you know, and obviously it's common sense that like Black people are humans as well, so like treat them like a human. But I think that needs to be said during these training sessions. I think that everyone who wants to be a police and who's already a police officer, you need to retrain. You need to re-go through these programs in order to properly understand. Because yeah, I think once that happens, then I'll be a little bit more hopeful. And it's unfortunate, but right now I can't say that I'm too hopeful for that, because this isn't something new. Like I said before, this has been a thing for years and years and years. It's been a topic for years and years and years. Yes, it's amplified right now because of recent events, but it's something that they know about and that they know that they should be doing, but haven't done. So once I see that, then I think it'll be a sign to me that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I feel what everyone has said, and you know, I think for me, my hope, my dream, what I would love to see is all of these things that have popped up, especially recently with the spotlight of the world on it. I would love to see that that's something that becomes rare, that it rarely happens anymore. And when it does, I would love to see the accountability of the justice system, and the way that they prosecute the suspect who's doing these things. So you know, it's so common. We see this pop up on our screens all the time, and we see these videos, and there's a bunch of evidence, but it's very rare that we see, even though with evidence and proof, that those who have done something like that, especially those that are you know, in law enforcement, and this is not just to bash them, because there are great policemen and women, and there are great and just judges, but too often we see them not being held accountable for what they've done, and still being employed, and still, if they do go on leave, it's paid leave, and there's no prison time or anything like that. So I would love to see just accountability and justice in those kind of situations where people are being killed, or when they're or trying to kill but are not going through. So in attempted murder cases or whatever it may be, I would love to see that on a huge scale, globally, everywhere where those things is happening. And then I would love to see certain laws that have been put in place, or that have been put in place to keep certain communities and certain peoples superior, and other communities and other peoples inferior. I would love to see those removed and taken down, because as you've heard throughout this whole time, we're all equal. And there is no I'm higher than you or you're higher than me. But we should all, you know, take heed of the scriptures and consider others better than ourselves. We should be a servant to all. You know, so I think that those things need to be changed in the system as well. So I would love to see those. Those are very practical things I would love to see removed and changed and fixed and dealt with, you know, immediately. And I think that's something that can happen. But there is a lot of people that have opposed it, because those things have been trying. There have been people and groups that have tried to, that have addressed those things. But again, those that have been in power and those that are in authority and just the injustice and the corruption in the system, it continues to prevail, and nothing really moves forward. So I think if we all band together and say, look, we're not stopping until these things happen, then I think that's the best way that it actually will. But still, it's going to be an uphill battle, but that doesn't mean we should quit. So yeah, those are some things I would love to see practically happen sooner than later.
Yes, amen to sooner rather than later. At this point, it's at 8:40 and we are already over our time. But I just want to say, on behalf of everyone who's been listening, thank you again to our amazing panel. It's been such a gift that you've given to us tonight to share your life with us. And I know we only got to ask a couple of questions, but consider that our inquiry and our gift of also sharing ourselves with you. For everyone who is still on the call, I want to also say thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this and for sharing your Friday night with us. We will have a recording, and we can send that link out hopefully over email as a follow-up. We will also be sending a follow-up email this weekend with a few different resources that have come up. I've gotten some in the chat here, so thank you so much for those. And we'll make sure that you get access to the recording when that's ready. It will probably end up on our YouTube, so we will send you the link for that. But also, Connect City is going to be with us again on Sunday morning. So this listening circle tonight was hosted by Kingsway-Lambton United Church and Fresh Start and the youth group at Kingsway-Lambton. And so Connect City is going to join us for our Fresh Start worship service on Sunday morning at 8:30. So we'll send out information for that in the follow-up email as well. But over the weekend, more questions might come to your mind. And you should know that in this worship service, there is a time for some Q&A as well. So feel free to be thinking about that over the weekend and bring some questions to that time, and we'll be able to hear more from Colin and Jordan on Sunday morning. But again, thank you so much for the gifts of your time and your vulnerability. And to everyone who listened, thank you for showing up and leaning into the conversation. We believe that this is what God is doing and calling us all into. And so we want to follow the Spirit. So I'm not really sure of a smooth way to end the conversation, but I'm going to end the meeting here. But go ahead and use the reaction on the bottom to give some claps to our wonderful panel. Thank you again, everyone. Such a gift tonight. And with that, have a great evening, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you Sunday.